Hi, this is Josh Lee, and welcome to the React on Rails on AWS series, where we use Ruby on Rails, React, and AWS to create a full stack application. This application we're building is a social media site similar to something like reddit.com. Today, we're going to initialize the Ruby on Rails API. We're going to set up some resources, and we're going to set up some endpoints for those resources to use with our React client and later during this series. So let's jump right into it. Here I have VS Code open. I'm going to open up my terminal here, and I'm on Mac, of course. And the first thing we want to do is create the repo or the application for Rails. To do that, we'll do the Rails new command. We're going to name this Reddit clone server. And in this project, since we have a front end already that is React, we don't need all the front end code that Rails generates for us. So we're going to pass in the API option so it doesn't create all the unneeded files. All right, looks like everything went okay. Let's do ls. Let's cd into our server. And let's go ahead and just do a Rails console or Rails C to make sure everything is working correctly. Or Rails server or Rails S. Let's go ahead and open up our window here. We're at localhost 3000. All right, and we have Rails set up here. Fantastic. So our API is initialized. Great. Next, let's go ahead and open this up in our Visual Studio Code. We're going to go to Open here. We're going to navigate to our repos folder and where I have saved this here. All right, this looks great. We got this set up. Now the first thing we're going to do is create some models in our database. In our database, we're going to have a user and a post to start with. So let's get started with those. So I'm going to open my terminal here inside VS Code, so we are still in the same window here. We don't have to use another window directly for the terminal. And we're going to create a migration, Rails, G or generate, migration. We're going to say create users. Now if you add create here in the migration name, Rails is going to give you a little bit of different syntax. Let me show you what I mean. So we've created this migration file. I'm going to come over here to our migration file. And Rails gives us a migration file that looks like this that creates the table for us. But if we do something like this, Rails generate migration add users, this is going to give us a little bit different syntax to start off with. It's just going to give us change here, and we would just have to type this in ourselves. So if you run a migration and you don't see this here, it's just because you didn't start your migration with the word create. If you do something else, it doesn't start with create. So we're going to delete this here. Now it's important that you never rename these migrations different names. So the way Rails works is that your migrations all have a timestamp, and then so Rails knows what order to run those migrations in. And it's very important that Rails runs the migrations in the correct order. Otherwise, you're going to try to modify tables that don't exist. So this is the syntax to create a new table called users. This is what it's going to look like in our database. Rails gives us a t.timestamps, which gives us created at and updated at. And these timestamps are generated automatically when you create or update the object. So first we're going to want is a email. And since email may be used to log in, we want that to be not able to be false. So null, or not able to be null. So we're going to say null false. We're going to pass that in here. Then we're going to do a string. And since we're going to be able to log in with this application, we're going to need a password. In Rails, you're going to save that password as password digest. And when we set up the authentication later, you'll see why we're using password digest instead of something like password. And let's also add something like string dot username null. And we want to make sure that this is not null. Now, if we wanted to, we could create another table. We can say create table posts like that. But I like to keep my migrations separate unless they're very interrelated. So post is a very different model than what a user is. So I'd like to keep that in a separate migration. I like to run these migrations as I build them. So I'm going to go ahead and run this right now. I type in Rails db migrate. And if we go to our schema file here, when we ran those migrations, this created this here in our schema. If you have not committed to GitHub yet, or pushed to GitHub, and you made a mistake in your migration, you can hit Rails DB rollback. And this will undo the last migration that you just did here. So maybe if you have a typo here, you can roll it back and change it. Typically, you'll do that for one migration. And besides rollback and migrate and editing data in here, you should not change anything with the names here, like I said. So let's go ahead and run that migration again. Rails DB migrate. This is going to give us back the users table here. And we want another migration called Rails generate migration create posts. Now we have this here. This is going to create our post table. We're going to do t.string. We want it to have a title. We also want to make sure this is not able to be null. We're going to say text here and content. Now the difference between text and content and string is that string only has 255 characters it can use inside the column here. And I imagine that we're going to want to have our our content to exceed 255 characters. So we can use text here, and we don't want our title to exceed that. And we don't want to have a column type of text if we don't need it. I'm not going to put null here for the text, for the content. I can imagine a scenario when we build out this application where we add maybe an attachment that would be on an attachment field and not as content. So for example, if you look at Reddit, you can submit just a photo, for example, or an image, and I would see that that content might be blank, and then you might have like text attachment here. So we're not going to put null false on that. And now we're going to add reference user here. Now what this does is this gives us this connects our post table to our user. Okay, so this means one user has many posts. A post has to have a user, so it can't be false, and we're denoting that this is a foreign key as well. Let's go ahead and save that. To run our migration again, Rails DB migrate, and we ran that successfully. So now we have our database set up. We have some tables in here. We have our post table and our users table. Now let's get set with our routing in Rails. Let's go ahead and delete some of these windows here. And we're going to go through our routing. Let's see, where's the routes folder? So the routes folder basically tells Rails how to handle traffic. We're going to write some code, and then once we write some code, we're going to go back and I'll walk you through each step so it makes sense, and I show you how everything works together. So we're going to say get posts to posts index. What this does is when the URL /post is created, we tell Rails to send this to the post controller and index. So for example, right now Rails sees that it goes to the post controller, to the post endpoint. It says utilized, unutilized, uninitialized constant post controller. So it has a controller that we need to make. If we go, for example, if we go to post and we say 1, 2, 3, we get a different error. We get that no mount matches post 1, 2, 3. If we change this here to 1, 2, 3 and save that, and now we get that back to that post controller error. So let's go to post, and it says, let's run this again. It says no route matches post 1, 2, 3. Let's go to uninitialized constant post controller. So in Rails, you need to come over here to application controllers, and you have a main application here, which later on we'll add some methods here that all of our controllers can use. But for right now, we're going to go to controllers, we're going to new file. We're going to add post controller. It's very important that you name the controller of this here with the resource name, post controller. And we're going to say class post controller. It's going to be application. It's going to inherit from the application controller. Okay. So now we have an application, now we have a post controller here. So if we come back to our URL, go to post, the action index could not be found on post controller. So if we go to def index, so now this is the index action. Save this. Let's go to this again. The action index cannot be found in the post controller. So let's go ahead and say return JSON message.hello world. Let's hit that again. Post. This should be render JSON. and we get hello world. Let's go ahead and comment this out real quick. And let's go ahead and for now, let's just create a post. We'll say post equals post.new. And we'll say this is some information here, okay? And render, we're going to render the message. We're going to render post as post here. Basically what we're doing is right now we're just setting an example model here just to pass through to our what we're rendering in JSON. Let's go ahead and try this again. Uninitialized controller, our post controller, post. So we have post, we're trying to use post, but we haven't created this model yet. So let's go ahead to models. And we're going to create post RB. This is going to be class post application record. This is going to validate the title. So this is very similar to what we wrote in our migrations, where this has to have a title, this has to have a body. It cannot be null. But what we should probably do is we don't just want these to exist. We probably want our title to have a different validation. So for example, we might want our title to have at least minimum 5 characters and a maximum of, let's just say 200 characters for now. Now our body, we said we didn't want to have, are we using body? Let me check real quick. So let me go to my schema, go to DB, schema, and we actually named it content here. So I'm going to copy content. I'm going to come back to post. So it needs our content. We don't want this to be true, because remember we could say it could not be. It could be not present, but we do want to put some kind of maximum on here. And for now, I think 1,000 is fine. 1,000 characters. Now what these are going to do is these are going to run when this gets created or when it gets saved. And if these don't match the validation, then the record is not valid and will not save or be created. So let's try this again. We're going to go to our posts. Unknown attribute error in post controller index. We got our new undefined method body for a post. So we need our content right here. Try this again. And now I have our post ID null, hello world, content. This is my first post. So here we have our ID of null. When you use new here in Rails, this is not saving to the database yet. So what we could do is we can create this new, and then we can do set other attributes on it. So maybe we want to say user ID equals current user ID. We might do this later. And then we might do post.save. And this would be able to save it here. But instead, for now, let's just create one. And let's go ahead and hit this again, our post. Not null constraint failed, post user ID. So if you remember that in our migration file, we said that a post has to have a user. So that's why it's failing. We need a user. So let's create a user in a model. Go to models. We're going to say user.rb. Say class user is going to be application record. Let's go ahead and delete all this. We don't need all this at the moment. And let's see what we have in our schema that we had. What are we working with here? We have an email, a password digest, and a username. I did not set password digest as cannot be null, because I imagine an example where we could create a user and have them do some onboarding or create their username and then set a password. Or maybe even use a magic link later where we don't need the password. So this is why this is not set as null false. So we need an email, we need a username. Let's go to user. Say validates. We're going to say username. Length, minimum 3, maximum 5. I think that's okay. And we'll say unique. Uniqueness true. This makes sure that we can't have more than one username, or we cannot have the same username on multiple accounts or multiple users. And we'll do the same thing with email as well. And let's just go ahead and add a length here of a minimum, I should say 5. Let's just say 3. It's very rare that we might have a email with 3 characters, but I don't want to do something where the email has to be longer, much longer than that. Okay, I have a typo here in uniqueness. Let's do uniqueness, and let's go ahead and do case sensitive. Case sensitive. I'm going to say that is false. That way we can't have 2 users, for example, with Josh and Josh. And if we're doing that there, we should probably have that in email as well. Let's do uniqueness. False, just like that. Now let's create a user in Rails console. We're going to say Rails C for Rails console. User equals user.new. Okay, we're going to say user.username equals test user. User.email equals test@test.com. Say user.save. And this returns true here if it saves correctly. So let's go user.first. And now that gives us our user here with the ID 1. Some fields, Rails will show filtered here if you're just looking at the whole record here. However, if you do something like user first.email, it will show you that record. So let's get out console here. Now let's go try to create a post again. So we're going to go here. Now instead of going here to index, we really don't want to be creating a post with index. So let's go back to our routes. We're going to say post.post to post.create. Let's go to our post controller. Let's say create here, and now we have the create action. All right, but how do we create this since this needs a post request? I like to use something called Postman. The Postman, what we can do is we can do HTTP requests with a UI. You might be able to do something similar to this using the command line or terminal, but this makes it much easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new collection. This is a blank collection. And we're going to call this Reddit clone. Next, we're going to variables, and we're going to set a base URL here. Base URL, localhost 3000. And what that does is this allows us to use this base variable instead of typing in this every time. In our Reddit clone, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new folder, and I like to name this after my resources. So posts, for example. If you ever hear me say resources or someone else say resources, we're probably talking about a model that is related to a database table. So for example, posts or user, those would be a resource. So we want to create a new request. We're going to create a request. This is going to be a post. And I like to use this as create. We got our base URL here. And we're going to go to posts, just like that. And let's go ahead and let's save this here now that we have our create here. And send this here. Could not send request. Okay. Let's go ahead and create. So you see how this right here says post and this says create or get? It's because we haven't saved that. You need to save this here. Okay. Now let's go to, let's see here, routes, posts. Okay. So in our post controller, let's go ahead and just re-render post created so we can see a response here. Hope I did not save that. Let's try that again. All right, I just ran into a quick error, and it was because in my variable right here, I didn't save it yet. So we need to save it so we can use post. We can use base URL. We're going to hit post here, and we can see we get message post created. Now post, we need to send a body because it's a post request. And we're going to need a title. Say this is a title. And we're going to say content. Say this is some content. Now to make sure that this is hitting the controller correctly, let's come over here to create. Now let's make sure our controller is getting the parameters that we're passing through. And to do that, we can just go to message. We're going to use a special word in Ruby or in Rails called params. Save that. Okay. This gives us message. So since we saved it under message here, since we saved it under message here, it gives us params. These are all the parameters that get sent when you make a request with the controller. We got these that were in our body. It's a controller. The action is create. We have this here as well. This is mirrored to here. So Rails has something called strong parameters. If you do something like post equals post.new .params, well, that would pass all these through here, and you wouldn't want all these records to be passed through to try to create your post object. Well, you think, well, maybe you can just do post here. You could do params .post, but then if I want to pass in another thing like this and say ID, and I want to set the ID to something, well, then you might run into a problem. So what Rails has is something called strong parameters. And that allows us to whitelist what parameters can be sent through our controller and used. Go to def, we're going to say post params, and what we do is we say params require post permit title and content. As you can see, this post here, title and content, is post title and content, just like that. So now what we can do, instead of passing the params through that way, we can say post params. Instead of a message, let's send the post back. Alright, so now this is the post that we gave it here, and see how we did not set the ID because the ID was not whitelisted. It only let us set the title and content. So now instead of creating this just in memory, let's save this post. So we have post here. Now remember, our post was not saving because we needed a user. So for now, we're just going to say user equals user dot first. We're going to add a to do here to use this as the logged in user. To do, change this to the logged in user. And now we're going to set that post to that user. We're going to say post user. Now we want to do some error handling here as well. And to do that in our controller, we can do this. Post.save. Now if the post actually saves an active record, it's going to return true. And if it returns true and everything goes well, then we're going to hit this point here. And we're just going to render our post. And if it doesn't go well, we want to render some JSON. We're going to say errors. This is something built into Active Record. So if this tries to save and it has errors, it's going to give us an errors, and we can print out the full messages here. Let's go to status unprocessable entity. So now if we come over here, let's go ahead and save this, and let's try to hit our post here. Undefined method user for post ID nil. Okay. So we have a couple options here. We can do something like this and say user ID equals user.id. We can save that here, and that saves correctly. However, we really need to set up this relationship to the user and post. And to do that, we come up here. We can say belongs to user. Save this here. Let's go to our user model, and we're going to come over here and say has many posts. And this does exactly what you think it does, is it links these two together in Active Record and allows us to do methods that use them to connect to each other instead of having to find foreign keys on tables. So if we come over here, now we can do user equals user. Save this. Undefined method belongs to. Oh, post controller. I put this in the controller instead of the model. This should go in the post model. There we go. Belongs to user. Now let's try that. Now you have created this here. Okay. Now let's say we want to get all, let's go back to getting all of our posts now. Let's go back to the post controller. We can delete this line here. before we do that, let's check our error handling real quick. So if the post does not save correctly, you want to send some errors. So for example, we said it needs to have a title. So if our post does not have a title, we try to save that. It's going to return title is too short, minimum is 5 characters. And so when this does not save right here, this gets populated with those validation errors, which come from here. Okay. So if we give it a title, it will work. Now if we go to index, we'll say post.all, and we'll render this as post just like that. Now we can come over here to our post and we can create a new request. We will say index. If you hear anyone use the word index, it basically means that when you have a resource like post or a user, you will list all the resources. This is just going to be get here. And now we can see all of our posts here. User ID 1, user ID 1, and these all belong to the same user. All right. We're making great progress. So we can get all of them. We can create one. What about just getting one? Well, this is show. This is the show action. Now we need to set up a route to use this show action. So let's go to routes. And we could do something like get posts ID to post show. What this allows us to do, allows us to name a parameter that we pass through here in the URL. So if we come to posts here, we can get the ID from params ID. There's nothing special about this. We could change this to anything we want. We can change this to happy, and we can just get that ID from happy like that. However, it's convention to use something like ID, or if you're doing a search, you might have something like so. So this is the endpoint to get or to show an individual post. However, because we do a lot of this for our resources, Rails has built-in ways to do this for us. Just type in resources, and we're going to say posts. Post generates doing this generates a whole bunch of these routes for us, but right now we only want index, create, and show. So this one line right here does all of this for us. So we can get rid of that. Let's save that. Let's come over here. Let's comment this out. And whenever I change any code like that, for like with my routes, I like to go ahead and just test this code again to make sure it still works. Let's go back to create. Can we still create a post? We can still create a post. Can we still get all of our posts? We can still get all of our posts. So that still works. So let's go back to our post controller. And in order to do this, we would say ID equals params.id. And this is the command that we use to find a specific post by the ID. Post find by ID. We could also do something like find and pass the ID here. However, that would make our error handling a little bit more difficult for the time being. If this does not find a post, this throws an error. If this does not find a post, this returns nil. So this just finds one post where this or their ID equals this ID here. If we do the where clause, this will return an array and find all the posts with an ID of this. And of course, multiple posts would not share the same ID, we might have something like title nice post. For example, we'd find all the posts that have the title nice post. We might even do content, something like this. We'll get into more complex queries, but this is the basic of how where works. What we'll do is we'll say post, find by ID post, and let's render this post here. So let's go to Postman, and we're going to create a new request, post, and we're going to find the post with a 1, ID of 1. Send that here, and we get this here. So that's great. But if we send one with a ID of 1000, what do we get? We get a post equals null. Really, that's not ideal. What we would like to do instead is say if post present. This is just saying, is the post there? We want to render here. Otherwise, we want to give an error of post not found. If we go here, where were we at? Get. Let's rename this to show. Save this. And if we can't find it, we get post not found. Just test our happy path again. We get this here. Great. So now we can create a post, show one post. We can edit it. But what if we want to save, or what if we want to edit that post? We'd go to def edit end. Come over here. Actually, this is update in the API. Just update here. Come over here. We'll add that to our endpoints that we want. Come over here. I'm going to say if. So what we can do here is we can find the post again by doing this here. But what we're doing here is rewriting the code multiple times. That's not really a great way to do this. If we have to do this here, and we have to do this, if we have to do this here, and we have to do this here, it makes a lot of sense to extract this. And we can extract that by coming over here and saying def, we'll say set post. And we're just going to set that here. We're just going to do this here. This right here is the same thing as here. It just puts it in one line. This is Rails conventions. This is very common to do this. So one line is fine. It's still easy to read and understand. Now we want to set the post whenever we do update or show. And to do that, we do before actions. Before action, we're going to set the post. So before the show action here and the update action here, we're going to set the post. We don't want to do that for the other ones because we don't need the post there and it won't send an ID and it'll throw an error. And so you can use the before action that will run before specific actions. You also see this when you do something like checking login status. So we have before action, show. So let's come back over here to show. Let's delete this here. And let's try save this, and let's go back to show and see if that works still. Show. This still works, great. So we go to update. We will say if post update post params. So this post, remember, is coming from set post here, which is coming from this before action. Post params is the whitelisted params that we're sending here. And if this is valid, it will return true. And so that's valid. We want to render the post. Otherwise, we want to show the messages here. let's go to update. So this is, let's create a new request. We're going to say update. Here, this is going to be put, I believe. So we have our post here. We have to pass in the ID. Go to body. And I'm just going to copy this previous body here. Go to update, paste. Let's go ahead and save this just to make sure it updates right here. We're going to say we're just going to prepend updated to these values. And here we have updated. So now if we go back to show, we try to show the post with the ID of 1, updated here. Now if we try to update this and we try to put the title as something with an empty string, try to save that, we're going to get title as too short, minimum is 5 characters. Let me show you exactly what's happening here for this error handling. If we go to Rails console, if we say post equals post.first, so we got our post here. Now if I set post.title equals to an empty string, and I set post.valid valid, this returns false. It's not valid because it does not meet the checks that we put here in models. It does not meet the validations here. And so this will return a false. You can do this before you try to save it. So this will return false if it doesn't save, or if we wanted to, we could try to test it before, but that's just one extra step. We can use this though if we want to show errors to the user before trying to save it to the database. So now we have our update. And the last thing we need to do is add destroy. Let's come back to our routes, and we also want destroy here. Save this, post controller. We want to set destroy here. And we're just going to delete that. If post destroy, we're going to give a successful message. Otherwise, we're going to show the errors here. Save this. Before we destroy this, let's just make sure we can see it again. So this is the post with ID 1. If we hit it here, we can find it here. So let's create our request. We'll say destroy. Destroy. Post 1. This is going to be delete. Let's save this. And we're going to send this here. It says post deleted successfully. If we try to show this again, post 1, it's going to give us not found because we could not find the ID. And it gives us this error here because we're using find and not find by. This gives us our prettier error right here. What we have just implemented is called CRUD, is creating a resource, reading a resource, updating a resource, and destroying a resource, and typically listing all the items of the resource. This is called CRUD, and if you hear someone say, I've completed the CRUD for a post, then that means they've set up these endpoints here. You might hear something, I've created the CRUD endpoints for the post resource, maybe something you hear. So now that we have this set up here, we can come and set up our React client and start reading and writing data from here. So now that we have this set up, and we will do that in our next video.